Good day and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to try to do for this update a little bit of a how-to as well as a show off. So this is where I am so far with the flying Edsel. The desire was to give it a worn and beaten and battered look. So as you can see, the lower quarter panel up here and the door, I've actually gotten some rusting done. The rest of it, I've gone through and done chipping effects on. I did the paint job, did a bit of buff dry brushing on the top to give it a rough look, and did a buff dry brushing on the bottom of these two black panels. I still need to buff the back, but that's, where we are right now. And then once I get done with this, we have all of that to do. So all of the engines need to be done in detail, etc., etc. So I got a lot more to do. But what I did want to do is show the technique I'm using to get these rust effects. And it's pretty simple. And I haven't seen anyone else do it quite this way, and I had a couple of people ask me what I do. So I figured I'd go ahead and take a few moments to show you. So the chipping was done with Vallejo basalt gray, and everybody knows chipping with sponge dip, and then and that's pretty much what was done. So now you pick the places that are going to be worn and chipped and whatever, so those spots become targets for rust, and that's where you build up from. So the rust colors that I use they're all Vallejo, so we use smoke. And we only need a little bit of each. So we use smoke. We use a touch of black. Or I use a touch of black. And I pre-shook these, by the way. And a bit of Model Air Burnt Umber. And Burnt Umber gives this blackish brown, almost an orangish look. And this is the one that's sort of my basic rust. And then, whoops, that was nice. And then for final detailing, once I can get that put back on, our final touch-ups, which we may or may not get to today, is this bit of orange red. So let's put that, and that's like way more than I need for what I'm doing. So here's sort of the trick, and I do everything with this brush. So this is the brush that I use. But essentially what I do, to get it wet first. And that's sort of the start. Just kind of brush on and get the surface wet. And then I'll kind of rub it off and get the thing wet. And then I'm going to come in here and intentionally get the color to bleed and just sort of spread out. I know I kind of ruined what I was just doing, but we're going to do it again. Now that you got a nice layer. And you see what that color's doing is it's making those title marks. And get a little bit of the darker one there. Drop that in, drop that there. Could use a little more color, a little more water there. Let's go back to that spot. And just dab that in. And you see how that's sort of running. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the way water works to mess up any tide marks, and that right there is what I was after. That dot, because that's where I get this. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that dot there. I'll go back to the darker color, drop a dot of that in there, come back here for a little bit of black, and drop that. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to spend time just sort of spreading color around and doing these dots. And then, I'll come back to this spot here, put a little more black, pick up a little more of this burnt umber. And I'm just looking to fill in where those chips are. I'm looking to get the water or the paint to expand out just like that. And I want it to sort of fade. I don't want those nice sharp tidal marks like you see out here. So where I'll see those, I'll kind of blend them in. But where I have these pools, just reinforce. And then what will happen is as they dry, they'll have those faded edges. See how that edge right there is faded? That's what it'll give me, and that's what I want. I'm looking for those kinds of edges. And the real trick, what's making this work, is that the surface is wet. And I can do it by just dabbing my brush on there if I want to. Or I can dry off or sort of wipe my brush off on my finger right there. And do what I did there to sort of pick up water if I need to. And it's essentially keeping this wet is what does this. And you kind of get used to how the water will flow and how the paint flows with the water. And you just sort of layer it. It's not really glazing, but you lay color in that way. And that's how you get there. Or that's how you get what I'm after. So like here, I want to go ahead and drop a little bit more in here. And I'm following the chip marks. Because that's where, paint's chipped. And that's where rust would go. So rust will also settle down here in by the trim here. So I'll sort of dip that in there and I'll let it go onto the trim because that'll make the trim look old. I kind of want to extend that up on here too. Now that's a little much. So what I can do, get this wet and sort of work this around. And what you do is you bring the color into the center and that concentrates it away from the edge and softens up the look. See, like right there, I can pick that up. I can just draw that right in there. And that gives me that nice, soft edge that I'm after. I'm going to do that right there. And now, what I can also do, now, ideally what I would do is I would let this sort of dry up. And then I'll come back in a little bit with this, but I can do this now. And this looks really stark at first when you drop this in here, this orange. It has a very, very drastic color change. But once you get that activated, mix in just a touch of that brown, you can see that it takes it to that dusty, orangey rust color that I'm looking for. And that, right there, mix in a little bit of this along the scratches. Keep that a little bit. You want to keep it random, right? So now that I'm down here on this panel, my brush has got a whole bunch of color on it. I'm gonna want to pick up some of that. There we go. And take that color away, and just start dropping the color in here. I want to be careful because I've already worked on that panel. I don't want to reactivate it, which it will. It will do. And then I'm just going to work it. And there are probably faster methods, or maybe even better methods. But this is something I find that works for me, for how I'm doing it. And I like the result. And what I'll do here on this panel, I'll do a little bit of there. little bit of marks there. I'm actually using my brush, and I'm mixing right here on the palette, and I'm mixing on the subject. I want to soften that up a bit. And that's where we're going. That, a little bit of brown, darken that up just a touch. And that is how I do it. I mean, it's fairly simple. It's just, I mean, really all I do is play. And, you know, like right here, you can see how just touching it gives that little dot. And then as it bleeds out, that's where that and that come from. It's just doing it like that. It's just giving it those little touches over and just repeat it. And I will do this along this edge here, because right there's where all those scuff marks would be. And it'll turn, that's a little much. Yes, I use my finger a lot for that. And there, so if you've done too much, that's exactly how you clean it up. That's how I clean it up. You just go ahead and there. So now I've got a lot on there, right? And actually I kind of like it like that. Put a little here, put a little more there, more here because this is still damp. And as this dries up, you can see like now that surface is a bit dry. I can just touch it. And it's still damp. That's the cool thing about this is even though most of this paint is starting to dry, the surface is still fairly damp. And it allows for this bleed to happen, which is what I'm after. And just reinforcing this gives us. And the cool thing, like I said, when it's in this shape, all I have to do is I can just take my brush and I can just erase it. I can just sort of smooth it around, move the color around. That'll lighten it or, you know, make it go away if I want to. But that's it. That, in a nutshell, is my technique for doing rust effects. Now I'll come back a little bit later once this is dry, do a little touch-ups with some more of the orange and a little bit of the brown. But in essence, that's the direction I'm going. So I hope this was helpful. And if you find that this is, yeah, great. I appreciate it. And otherwise, this is the next installment on the Flying Edsel. So I've got a lot more of this to do. I've got all these panels to do and all the rest of it. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this and happy modeling.